Hi, Hunter Hastings here. Our podcast today provides a penetratingly insightful and visionary look into the future of the firm, specifically the digitally enabled firm, because technology, digitization, will change the way we conceive of our firms, design them, and operate them, not just in terms of the efficiency and the capacity for operating at a high level, but the very value creation that we deliver through our firms. How? Well, technology can deliver a new experience, a better experience to customers at the end user stage, but also to employees. And as we know here at the Value Creators, value lies in the experience. But there's a lot left for humans to do, as we'll find out. We're talking to David Kramer. He is the founder and the chief product officer at Cooperative Consulting. And his company and he himself has spent decades designing, operating, and helping their clients assemble and push forward these digitally enabled firms, which are changing the nature of value creation. He likes to be called Kramer, his second name, so you'll hear me do that. And let us see his vision of where digitally enabled firms are going to take us in the value-creating pathway of the future.
This is the Value Creators Podcast. Value creation is the sole purpose of any business and every business, and for all of us as entrepreneurs. Listen to great value creators as they share their successes, trials, and lessons learned. Join us as we explore how to think as value creators, how to act as value creators, and how to view business through the lens of value creation.
Kramer, welcome to the Value Creators Podcast.
It's great to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a great pleasure for us. It's very exciting, actually, because we've been exploring what some people call the new management paradigm for the 21st century, trying to think about how companies work and firms work and management works in the 21st century. And you have a completely different vision, I think. You come from a different place. The term I've picked up from some of your presentations and slide decks is the digitally enabled firm. But that's a big umbrella phrase to describe a very innovative and groundbreaking kind of a concept. So can you start there? Can you give us your vision of the digitally enabled firm in right now, today, and as we go forward in the next few years?
Yeah, that's a great place to start, Hunter, and thank you for heading us off in that direction. So the digitally enabled firm has begun to understand the facts that in the next economy that's going to drive what we as consumers feel is appropriate to meet our demands, we're going to want instant access to products, to services, and we're going to want them in a very Uber-like fashion. To do that, the back office has to become very transparent. The things that you do typically to put order processing through from the front office to the back office and all the things associated with that are going to start to become very transparent, and not just on the consumer side of the business, but on the business to business side as well. And as you do so, you've got some key concepts. We call these the 5 key business functions. And in those 5 key business functions, we have 4 considerations that you have to deal with. The first one is branding and marketing. For a digitally enabled organization, these 5 constructs have to be at the top of their game. And then we'll talk a little bit about how a digital enabled organization has to turn into a digital organization. We'll go through these constructs here. For digital enablement, there's what we call the 5 things that face the customer and then the internal things that service them. And we put them on a circle in most of our presentations. So number 1 is marketing and branding. If you can't let the people who want to buy your products and services know you're available, you can't engage them, you can't actually incorporate your process into their daily thought culture, you're not going to succeed. The ability to do that at an ever-improving rate of adoption from the mindset and the perspectives where people are operating is becoming super, super automated. And so you have to really get good at marketing and branding on a digital method and digital means. That doesn't mean you're not going to have printed flyers. It just means the way that things actually get produced is going to be hyper accelerated through tools and solutions that don't have people having to mull over these things, worry about the spend. If you do really good at marketing and branding, the next part of the 5 key business pillars is this next construct that says sales and commerce. And the sales and commerce to me is super exciting because what's going to happen in our future world is the things that we're used to, the e-commerce sites and things of that nature, they're going to go away. Digital assistants are going to start to overpower that, and they're going to become the way that we adopt how we purchase and how we see things in our daily life. And if you're really good and the sales and commerce engines are working and people come back to buy from you, then the next thing you have to do is you got to fulfill all those orders. And so orders fulfillment and operation is the third key. If you do that well and things are flowing through the system, then the next thing after that is what we call customer engagement. I have to engage you once up front during your branding and marketing, but I got to keep you engaged once you buy from me. So those companies that are establishing both the sustainable and high growth patterns have learned how to re-engage that customer. They may do so during the flow, they may do so after the flow, they may do so both, but they're learning how to re-engage that customer in inventive ways. Some people are doing things like creating digital online places for you to go back. And these aren't just small brands. These are brands like Gucci, like Rolex, that are out in the metaverse and they've established their digital place for you to go meet others. And they're doing so at an ever increasing rate of automation. If all of that is doing well, then you've got to make certain that you govern this. You must have the right governance around it. We call this service delivery management. If you're really good at those 5 things, then behind you is a powerhouse of both, we call them Homo sapiens and digital
Yeah,
sapiens.
I love that expression.
Right? That are dealing with how you're doing these and helping you do them very, very well. And so we call that the inner circle. Those are your legal departments, your IT departments, your finance departments, your HR resource departments. And they're becoming digitally enabled to accelerate how quickly they can adopt and personalize the services to that outside circle of those 5. A digital organization, and a key thing that we do as we go into a company and help them become hyper-focused on how to accelerate in the next generation automated economy, is we focus on those 5. A key construct here is the evolution of how we have to manage and govern our organizations to deal with this. This concept we call the digital organization. And while we may not have the ability to go straight to a DAO today, it's going to come to a point where our decision making and the accuracy of a millisecond decision has to become so finite and so capable at, literally milliseconds at a time. You're not going to rely on our traditional management styles. So leadership and governance is going to exist, but the method of leadership and governance is going to change. Digital CEOs will become present by the year 2030. It's happening. It's going to occur, and it's going to show up one day, and someone's going to go, why is that company getting the results they're getting? And they're going to be talking to a CEO that's a digital CEO, connected in all aspects to all the decision-making processes and able to help facilitate those processes from a strategic governance perspective and do so in millisecond transaction times. The digital organization will occur, and those constructs of digital enablement, then being facilitated by a digital organization, are going to have a rapid rise and shift, probably from the year 2030 on.
What's the role of humans in that future, Kramer? Presumably they write the code. They've got to, if decisions are to be made, does a human write the decision-making code, or does it evolve digitally?
In fact, we right now are having our digital counterparts write most of the code inside our environment. So code writing, sad to say, is going to become less and less Homo sapien based and more digital sapien based. But the part that humans still show, if you think about who we are, our microsystems and the computer that runs us is the size of 2 fists. We are the most amazing machine on the planet. And the ability to take in that 2 fists, a little cavity, a little portion of the brain that does the majority of what we have to process and do the things that we do is trying to be simulated. Neurological computing is coming along, and it's coming along very slowly, but still coming along, because our brain does a billion things at once, and it's created the way to make those processes work in a signature capability very efficiently. The thing that we still will do very well, that AGI and the other components are going to have a difficult time with, is we understand people. People will understand people for probably a very long period of time at the emotional perspective. Um, and that piece is where the consumer engine actually lives. Economic dystopia and the Skynet taking over is only true if, from an economic perspective, we as human beings give up the right to control our own consumership and grow our own economic capability, and enjoy the world that we live in. That process requires human in the loop to be the core of that. The machinery and the digital aspect of it can understand feedback loops very well. So it can go in today with the new models and the things that are wired around how AI is working, and it can give you some data and get your signal. So it can say, red shirts, you got it. Do you like it? Yes or no. You click a like button or you don't. It takes that feedback. And it may it may give you that same piece of information 4 or 5 ways to prove out the signal. What it can't tell 100% is, why do you like the red shirt? I like the red shirt because my grandmother gave me one when I was young. And I still have an emotional attachment to it that I can't necessarily verbalize to you, but I do. And those things that are human about us are very hard to be replaced without humans being about us. And so the human in the loop is going to stay in place for that for a very long time.
Yeah, we call that, we call that empathy, Kramer. That's our word for it in economics, understanding how another human thinks. We talk about deriving insights because that helps us, as you say, understand motivation. Why do people do what they do? So how does that fit in? How does empathy, that human empathy, does it inform the digital sapiens, or how does it help the digital sapiens derive an insight which it can't do because it's digital?
Yeah. So I think the first question you asked, which is, how much does the human Homo sapiens stay in the loop, is kind of a preliminary to that, right? The very first thing that happens is the digital sapient is good at taking organized data and structured process and executing it at a speed that is really hard for humans to do. What it's also good at is saying, I'm going to take the reward systems and make them more efficient. Self-learning AI is here. It's incrementally increasing its ability to learn stuff on its own. But what it doesn't know what to do with is these emotional components of that empathy. So we will have, I'm going to call them triggered models, things that we say these are states of that empathetic input that the human will have to interact with. And as the human changes those empathetic components, it will update in a more digital way what the models do with that empathy. Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
If you go back 50 years and we look at how we felt about the environment around us, the things that we enjoyed, the places we wanted to go, there were things there that we have that those don't have. And let me give you an example of that. The metaverse didn't exist 50 years ago. So you couldn't have empathy, you couldn't have compassion, you couldn't have feeling, you couldn't have things around what the metaverse means. The Homo sapien will sense and interact with that and understand it, and then will allow that empathetic components to be a part of the digital sapiens models and how things plug together and what to do with those models in a way that's efficient and allows the models to adapt to it. So that Homo sapien will always be a part of that empathetic reasoning process and creating more and more intelligent ways to interact into the digital sapiens world.
So the human empathy identifies a signal. When you see this, it suggests that. and translates it empathetically, eventually the digital AI will learn that, presumably, and get better and better at it.
Correct.
Okay, good.
And the means of doing that is continuously being improved as we go forward.
So one of the exciting parts of this, it's exciting in multiple dimensions, but one is the core to it is a direct connection to the customer. We can still think of this as customer centricity, or some people call it zero distance to the customer. It's the direct connection to the customer, bringing the data. You call it database decision making, but it's customer data. It's what customers do, and that translates into these insights. So we're still customer centric, right?
Our model today, until we get to a level 2 civilization, is a consumerized model. And there's no matter how you want to shape it, without people buying, you really don't have anything of any sense that can be grown or scaled. And so we call it data-driven decisions. That data-driven decisions component is all about understanding those pieces of data that allow us to effectively manage and govern across that consumer's behavior, the consumer's desire. How do I influence that consumer behavior? How do I make certain that I'm a part of culturally becoming inside that consumer's life cycle a piece of what's going on?
Yeah. So let's come back to the present, Kramer. Cooperative Computing helps clients to get on this journey. It's August 2023. Let's say you have a new client that comes to you and say, "I want to be in this journey." How does the transition get going? How do you start, and how do you advance it?
So the very first thing we seek to do is to understand. There's nothing so arrogant as someone that walks in and tells you everything about their company and what they do and how wonderful they are without understanding, does it have any meaning or relevance inside the space that you need help with. So the very first thing we do is what we call a DMX, or a discovery, to go into the organization and understand where is that organization. And we do so across 4 dimensions. Okay. We talked about the 5 key pillars of a business. Yeah. And across those 5 key pillars, we go in and assess 4 dimensions. 1, organization and the capability for that organizational structure to digitize. Number 2, we call it methods and procedures. SOPs are a way to control. Methods and procedures are a way to adopt. So we try to stay away from SOPs, and we try to work more within the methods and procedures framework. Number 3 then are systems and technology. If you have the right people, they're doing it the right way, then they need facilitated by systems and technology. And then the 4th thing are key performance indicators and metrics. What are the things that say it's doing well or it's not doing well? So we go in and assess those 4 components across your business. And we look at your business in the isotome, in the construct of these 5 key business areas that are the outer circle and the key business areas that are the inner circle. We call that the current state. We take that current state, we work through it with your organization, and then from that we say, okay, if we want to become a digital organization that is able to accelerate, what are the things that we have to break down? And we break those into 3 classes. Class number 1, grow revenue. What do we do to grow revenue? Number 2, what do we do to become operationally efficient? Number 3, what do we do to ensure that we can continuously build the organization through data-driven decisions? So we have a model with these 5 key business areas, the construct of the 4 things within each business area, and then these 3 modeling capabilities inside each of those. Once that assessment is done, we sit down with your teams and we build a joint strategy. That joint strategy has an outcome goal. That outcome goal may be to grow the company from 500 million to $1 billion, from $1 billion to $4 billion. It may be that we want to impact the environment that we work in, and we want to make change happen emotionally from this state to this state. Whatever it is that you want to accomplish, we then model that into what do we need to do to adopt the organization's capabilities to do that in a more digitally enabled fashion and become a more digital organization. We build a joint strategy. Everyone agrees on it. There's nothing worse than the partner coming in saying, this is what you should do. And you're not being bought in on what that is, nor understanding it. So we do that with you and we adopt those things. Cultural entity is a part of this. What do you do one day when the person sitting next to you isn't really there and they're fully digital and you have to pull them into a staff meeting? And Digital Dan's in the staff meeting next to you, and he's got a photographic memory. So everything he had on his to-do list, he never forgets it. And all the components that he gets on his to-do list, he seems to get them done well. But he doesn't understand human empathy.
Yeah.
So you're interacting with him in a whole different way, but Digital Dan is a part of your organization now. And so as you learn to adopt this philosophy of saying, I got to become digitized, the key concepts on the organizational construct have to be thought through in this joint strategy. What are we going to do to adopt organizational change that allows this to happen? 2, what methods and procedures do we change to start to say that we're going to do things different and allow us to make decision making? Some are risky. And if you don't step over the edge and make decisions and take that risk early and learn how to do it, it gets you in trouble. I think we saw a bunch of articles about someone starting to use androids in their processes. And the androids are slow, they're picking up stuff and they're moving it from point A to point B. And people are like, oh my gosh, that's not really helping. Well, no, this is the process of becoming a digital organization. He's there. Is he perfect yet? No, but by the time he does, and in your manufacturing plant, you have 130 of those units that never sleep. They charge. They may even get solar power charging so that they don't have to plug in. As you start to understand that construct and how to utilize that in your organization, your mind has to shift what you do and how you do it and how you think about it.
Yeah.
So we then take that joint strategy, we turn that into an execution plan. We take the top 3 or 4 things. We help you put together the business proposal for that. We help you champion that into what you do in the organization to execute it. And then we move you towards that digital paradigm. And then we measure the success of that in an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
That is what we do with companies to help them accelerate and prove that that acceleration is working.
So let me pick up on a couple of those elements that you talked about, one at the beginning, one at the end, to make sure we understand. So you talked about a transition away from control, and that's a delightful idea. I think control is one of the errors of the previous paradigm of management. We try to control everything with plans and hierarchies and orders, and that can't be done. But you also mentioned KPIs, and I always think of KPIs as a product of that control environment, right? That's one way I can control you. I can tell you what the indicators are and hold you to it. So help us with that. Is when we get away from control, we still have KPIs?
Yeah, here's a good example. So data is the new goal. And as data is the new goal, the efficacy of your data has kind of 2 layers. One layer is the data construct itself. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
For example, let's take your customers. You have customers and you need to track them. So you have master data, and one of those components of your master data is the customers. The other component, let's say, is your suppliers. You've got to maintain this. And that first layer of master data management needs to have the qualifiers on top of it that says, how clean is that data? So that someone can instantly see, I've got 20,000 customer records, but only 12% of them have contact information, phone numbers, so on and so forth. And those are important for me to interact with that customer. Or I've got 20,000 customer records and half of them are mangled because I say AT&T, ATT, AT&T, right? And so I don't have a good handle on that thing that's gold in my environment. So therefore, I have to put in place something that I'm going to call metrics and KPIs to say, in your construct of data, how clean is that data that's your gold? It's not to control it so much as to manage and maintain it in an organized fashion for that data construct that you need to utilize for your business. If you're a manufacturer and you're running 13 manufacturing lines and you've got SCADA systems configured in that are taking air devices out of it, bottles aren't capped properly, so on and so forth, and I don't have the systems on top to allow those data pieces to come back into something in a regular fashion and have that KPI in place for the machine to talk to the machine, then I can't get an organized outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to have metrics, to understand those metrics, and to have those key performance indicators in place so that that human, as it starts to interact with the digital sapient, the language becomes more about those data elements. The thing that makes that system operate so efficiently as either you have helped it programmatically understand these KPIs and metrics, or it starts to understand them for itself. That's what feedback loops do.
Yeah.
It starts to build its own internal system for KPI and metrics. So you're not trying to create control like every morning there's a stand-up call and I'm going to tell you what to do, right? It's we all look at the same dashboard and we understand how clean is the data for our customer data. And when something pops up that alerts us that says, hey, the southern region is struggling to make certain that they're getting the contact information we need to usefully manage our customer. So those things are still going to be critical for us in common business operations.
We're delighted to announce the Value Creators online course. For entrepreneurs in every kind of business, big, small, or medium, at every stage, in every industry, our course provides the foundations and principles on which to build success. Simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to creativity, innovation, and competitively superior business action. There are 11 foundational principles or mental models that together cohere into the value business model. Principles for value generation, principles for value operations, principles for value finance and accounting, and principles for value sustainability, as well as the new knowledge accumulation you'll need for continuous innovation. These principles are delivered by top business professors from top business schools: Mark Packard, Per Byland, Gordon Miller, David Rapp, and Bart Vanderhagen. You'll find video lessons from them, along with downloadable tools, processes, and other valuable content. Master these lessons, and you'll master the most important skill in business: value creation. Go to thevaluecreators.com and click the course link. One of the trends that people worry about in today's digital environment is the concept of tracking and surveillance. So you've got this customer data, and it's being used now to, they call it targeting, which is a ominous sounding word. And people are nervous about that on various dimensions. I've heard you talk about a response experience or a response environment, which the customer will feel better about. They won't feel surveilled. They'll feel responded to. That's a bad piece of grammar, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit? I'm going to feel better as a customer in this new digital environment.
Yeah. So this empathy, right? This component of how I operate and the ways that we start to interact and the mode of understanding what you like in interaction is going to become probably the second, I'm going to call it the second most important attribute of business operations. The first important attribute is, am I able to do it profitably? Because if you can't stay in business, you can't serve your customer. But the second is to understand the needs of that customer and understand how to interact with the needs of that customer that meets them where they're at. And therefore, we call this hyper-personalization, okay? And so the emotional tension that gets created between the consumer, and I'm going to use that as a generic term, and the interface they work with, right, is different for different consumers. For example, when I walk into Kroger and I see that all of the aisles that I used to walk through and talk to the cashier are gone, and they've been replaced with a scan system that didn't give me a discount but made me the scan operator, I'm frustrated. The first time it comes in, I'm frustrated. I didn't get a discount, but you made me do it. That's a digital interaction right there that they put in place. And that insertion was intended to do some things to make it more efficient so I'm not waiting in line, right? But there sure wasn't a lot of observation necessarily on my behalf.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be mostly my problem because half the people that are under my age group are like, I love that line. I don't have to talk to anyone and I whiz right through it,
Right.
right? And so as we start to interact in this digital paradigm with the next generation and we start to get the feedback, the two components we don't have today is real-time human sensory perception. That's somewhat missing in the world that we deal with from a consumer workspace. As the digital assistants become more attached to us, they're going to sense those things in us. They're going to sense frustration and um, how do we feel about that interaction that we just had. We're starting to see a couple technologies dabble into this today that let you interact in real time with attached devices that let you go ask to have a car ordered, or I'm on my way home in about an hour. I need to make certain that eggs are ready to go. I'm going to pick them up on the way. I want to go by the store because I might want something else. And I'm having this conversation in real time. And the next thing you know, all of that's being orchestrated on the back
Mm-hmm.
end. It brings to mind a scene from The Fifth Element when they go up into this guy's office and he has on this desk a glass, and he explains to somebody that, you know, in the world that he's in, his means of destruction, because he's a bad guy, is a good thing because it causes all these other things to happen. And he flips the glass, it breaks, and all these little robots come out and clean it up that he put into motion. So that world of what is the value of something as we interact with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a consumer in the space, is going to be super important for how we learn to become digitized. And we got to become more aware of what those look like and how that interaction becomes valuable to the consumer. Podcasts are a good example. You and I personally like a podcast. It lets me interact with something in real time and I don't have to wait for it on a TV channel, so on
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. But there's a whole generation of people, right, who will tell you that the podcast is not as good a medium for them as I'm going to read it on Medium or Substack because I'm going to leisurely put together a catalog of stuff. And as we understand that consumer in that consumer space, we're going to start to build the tools out that enable that empathetic response to be calculated and immediately responded to and updates made in real time.
Yeah.
We're going to get effective at that hyper personalization.
So I like to think of the concept of the customer brings all of this into existence. That,
Yes.
you know, as economists, we think of it as the genius of the customer is they're never satisfied. They always want
Right.
something better. They might not know what it is, but they're just telling you, hey, this is not good enough. I want something better in the future. I can imagine a better future. Uh, is the world you're describing? Do you subscribe to that same idea? Our demand for transparency, our demand for responsiveness, we're, as consumers, bringing this into effect.
That's correct. Someone asked me once, you know, in the world of the chicken and the egg, from an economic standpoint, right? What actually happened first? Did we drive the demand, or did the demand drive us? And their perspective of this was, we think that technology is enabling customer demand. My evaluation of this, and I did a study in conjunction with a university across four buying channels along this line, is that technology responds to what it is that the consumer wants. And if it doesn't, the consumer goes and figures out a different way to achieve what they're looking for. Let me give you an example. I love pubs. I like to have beer with my friends. And I like the, you know, the Michelobes or the Heinekens or whatever you want to have as your beer. But I also was introduced probably 5 or 6 years ago to this construct of a microbrewery. The way a microbrewery started was a few guys said, I want my own beer because I can't get the manufacturers to build it the way I want. And they asked and they asked, and it didn't happen. So they said, I'm going to go build my own. And then that turned into a little place where 10 guys got together to drink it. And they were like, this is amazing. Whoever thought coffee flavored beer would be a good thing? You and I would probably say it's not. But 20 people showed up and 100 people showed up. And the next thing you know, the ability for me to manufacture my own beer, which was a concept that people are like, why would you ever want to do that? Is now just there's kits.
Mm-hmm.
You and I can go for $39 and have a experience that gets you the mini kit for $1,000. You get the one that almost lets you open your own pub and run the whole bloody thing all by yourself. Okay. That I call that consumerism. There's probably a better word from fancy people, but I call that consumerism. The consumer will figure out how to get to and achieve what they want to enable them for the effect they want in life. And when they do so, someone is going to observe it and turn that into a commercial paradigm. What's enabling this hugely is 3D printing, the ability for me to now self-manufacture and do so at an ever sophisticated level. We're now going from what I call generic molecular manufacturing, plastics, so on and so forth. And we now have food manufacturing starting to take place. And I believe by the year 2050, in Star Trek, you would walk up, you'd put your little thing inside the microwave looking thing, you'd hit the button, out would come your plate of food. That's a 3D printer. Okay.
Yeah.
And that 3D printer just happened to manufacture your food. But there was still a bartender over there serving you drinks because you still want a bartender serving you drinks. And we will adapt in an ever increasing pace as technology permits it to happen, how that hyper personalization occurs. Mm-hmm. And if we do not achieve it ahead of schedule, meaning we looked at it and the iPhone got created because someone went, I bet this would solve that problem. And so I'm going to introduce it, versus someone saying, I like this microbrewery concept. Let me go try it. The blend of those two are going to come together at an ever increasing rate that allows us to personalize what we want in the way we want it. There are three givens from the consumer. I want what I want, and that's ever shifting. Have you ever read The Fourth Turning?
Oh, yes.
So the concept of the fourth turning is real.
Yeah.
And as you go through those four turns, the I want changes for every one of those generational cycles, but I still want. I want what I want. I want it when I want it, and I want it the way I want it at the value I want it. That has never changed. All the way from caveman days when it was acceptable for a little bit to come in with the deer every day, and then someone said, no, I want some fish on top of it. And, you had to figure out how to deliver that. That's just going to continue. The personalized capability for us to get what we want in an ever increasing efficiency for us to get our hands on it right away is just going to continue to increase.
Yeah.
In Japan, there are now shops starting to show up where you can construct what you want. I would like this. I'd like these sort of gaming systems. I would like these sort of shoes and clothes, and you kind of start to put together, this is what I want. And then it starts to digitally produce those things for you. They're not cost effective. They're still in the early age, but we're going to get to the state where when you and I want a boat, we're not going down to the boat shop necessarily as much as we used to. We're going to say, I want a boat. We're going to sketch it. Mm-hmm. We're going to have the outcomes we want. I worked with Lego in the early days when they started to come up with build your own Lego set and, construct it the way you want. The Lego pieces are going to become more and more efficient for us to get to it the way we want. And the consumer tools are just going to make it instantly gratifying for us.
So from the point of view of the firm, one of the implications that you're talking about specifically is the increased acceleration of the rate of change. Speed upon speed upon speed, it gets faster and faster and faster. How do your clients and the companies that are digitally enabled, how do they deal with that? Is it you let the digital system keep up its responsiveness, or is there any way to direct that rate of speed of change?
Yeah, we call this the art of possible, mm-hmm. right? And understanding the art of possible. And I think there's two constructs here. One, it is becoming ever, I'm going to call it accelerated, but also efficiency with this acceleration. It has become ever accelerated, but more and more obtainable that you can ask the systems for what you want and the systems understand enough of what is out there and available that it can start to recommend to you the subcomponents and the putting together of these subcomponents into an outcome. Let me give you an example. So we have a partner who worked on a project with, I think it was Samsung or Panasonic, I can't remember. They took their entire product catalog, everything, and they digitally enabled it so that when you went out to, and you could do this via voice, you didn't have to do it with a keyboard. You could say, listen, I would like to build a mirror. I want that mirror to have a digital camera in it. I want that to also have a light that changes to 3 shades in it. I needed to actually work on DC power because I'm in Denmark and I have a whole DC power system in my house. And I wanted to have the radio in it that has the weather. And it would go, got it. And it would go compile all that for you. No product SKU for this. It puts that all together, builds you your own personal SKU and says, this is it. We can deliver it to you in 2 days. Here's the cost. Mm-hmm. That is the future of how things are going to happen inside businesses. That art of possible, right? The component of knowing that could be done was because as we interacted with these customers and said, we know what the art of possible is, right? It can be done. In the future, you're going to get better at, I call it prompting, but we're going to stop doing the keyboard prompting mm-hmm. and voice prompt. And we're going to ask the question, can I do this? And how possible is it? And what are the systems? And who can help me implement it? Because even if you can dream it up and the system tells you, here's the dream, you need someone to actually help you go deploy that and integrate that into the environment at those 4 levels. You still got an organization, methods and procedures, systems and technologies, KPIs and metrics. So it's got to be implemented within your environment. But the art of possible is now going to become more and more evolved into, I go to my learning system, my ChatGPT, Celeron, right? Android Plus, whatever you're using inside the toolkit that you have to start to ask the questions. And Microsoft does an amazing thing. I'm not trying to promote Microsoft, but Copilot and the way it's starting to operate is just a world-class thought, because they're watching you as you do what you're doing. And this construct of Big Brother is one of understanding how to let the tools be useful for me versus have the tools that are taking my information and making it useful for you. So private Copilot in an industry, in a business that's watching and observing, that starts to be able to come back to you to say, these are things that you are not efficient at, that you could be efficient at if you did, is going to happen. I believe we'll mark this down between you and I, right? Via Copilot in an industrial use within the enterprise. It's going to start to look at the world that you're in and start to recommend to you that, hey, I see this person over here and they're keying in invoices. They're getting them in and they're keying them in. You know, you can automate that invoice processing, and here's some recommendations for it, and it's going to send it to your head of finance. But that's just going to start to happen and give you the art of possible more and more. What we do as we engage our customers is we help them implement some of those technologies in an early adopter fashion so that they get credible outcomes. There's a lot of junk out there, a lot of junk, and it'll give you recommendations that are not correct. And it's really hard to understand because they're so proficient at giving you what appears to be the correct answer that you have to have sometimes someone fact check that correct answer to make certain it's giving you what's really going to give you the benefit.
You know, Stephen Hawking, the great cosmologist, said, cosmology depends on the questions you ask. If you don't ask the right questions, then there's no cosmology. So who's asking the questions in that scenario, Kramer? Is it the firm or the person, the Homo sapiens, asking, how can I do this better? How can I do this faster? What's possible? Or is it the digital sapiens asking, why are you doing it this way?
Yeah, so this gets to a deep conversation that I think many people are going to struggle at. What does this look like, right? So every business's goal is to produce a product that the consumer finds value in, B2B or otherwise. to do so profitably and as efficiently as you can, get it into the hands of that operator and keep them delighted. Okay. The construct of that has, the three components. One, the empathetic component. Two, I'm going to call it the technical component. And three, the financial component. If we look forward, and I'm going to say the starting of this in 5 years, we will be really hard pressed to outperform our digital sapiens in saying, build me a company that goes and solves the following three problems, specify out what I need from a tech perspective, my margins, my pricing, who is my consumer, how do I get to the consumer? And I'm just going to sit there and I'm going to give it a whole series of, outcomes I want. And it's going to come back and be 90% accurate. And it's going to tell you the next company to go build. And then you get to decide what to do with it. But it's going to be really, really accurate. It's going to get closer and closer.
Mm-hmm.
Why? It's got the universe of all knowledge at its fingertips. And that includes consumer data and buyer behavior data and things where value constraints are being removed and they're being interacted with in real time. So who's asking the question? I believe it's still entrepreneurial individuals asking the question, or even less entrepreneurial business operators, because you don't have to be an entrepreneur to operate a business. So that construct of who's asking the question is going to be that. The method for how that question gets asked and answered is going to dramatically change. Will there ever be a moment where someone says, I'm going to make you a digital CEO and I'm going to put you into the hotel industry? Let's just start with hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And let's say I'm not there yet. Let's say that my business right now is I do laundry services and I've built $100 million laundry services business. You bring your clothes, I clean them, you're delighted. And I like services. And I think I want to get in the hotel business. So I tell myself I'm going to get a digital CEO. And I'm going to tell the digital CEO, I would like a hotel services business. Go figure that out. That's it. That's all I tell him. He says, got it. And that digital CEO has been built. He's been trained as to what are all the constructs of go figure that out. And he kicks off and goes, and he comes back with a business plan. He's already talked to 3 capital firms to raise the capital for you. He's already got investors in those capital firms that he's reached out to tell him what it looks like. And, here's the opportunity. So he's already got 10 million in investment capital. He's already found your first 3 customers. He's already determined what the build out's going to cost. And he's done so with a bunch of digital sapiens. The only thing he hasn't done yet is understand empathetically, what does that hotel chain look like? Is it going to look like a Courtyard, or is it going to look like, a Virgin hotel where you got a whole lot of things that are cool to go into, and you're not necessarily just a tired traveler that's out there trying to do your job on the road.
Yeah, because
right?
It's a subjective experience in the end that determines that.
But it's going to become a lot smaller Homo sapien footprint
Yeah.
to get that outcome than what it is today.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're mentally there yet on the shift to say that's okay, right? But it doesn't matter. We are a business-driven society, and the outcomes of, I got to build a business that customers want, that is profitable, that can sustain my growth for my investors, at the end of the day becomes almost the, 70% of what you're trying to do. There are some that have got 70% the human and 30% the business, but it's often suspect how long those last.
Is there competition in that world, Kramer? So I'm asking that question about the hospitality industry. The digital CEO is organizing, creating it for me, and raising funds. It gets into operation. Are there lots of those competing, or are they all so unique that we don't need the competition concept anymore?
I have a really good friend. His name is Sonny Vanderbeck, and he's now CEO over a capital firm. But when I went to work for him, he was making a tremendous amount of money by building characters in World of Warcraft. He would go out and build the character, get them all pumped up, and then sell that character to someone so they didn't have to do that. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a job in the future for building digital CEOs. And I'm just going to build digital CEOs. and I'm going to get them into the playground. I'm going to get them tested. I'm going to get them war worthy, and I'm going to start to sell digital CEOs. So this construct of talent management and how does it work and what does it look like is going to drastically shift in the future, because your talent management agency now is going to be able to produce 10,000 of something for you. And those 10,000, I'm going to call them knowledge workers, those people that don't actually have to touch a keyboard and handle you at the reception counter, right? Are going to become more and more valuable. And I'm going to tune those things and make them more and more valuable. Now, the question I have here, and I haven't yet pondered it enough to think through it all the way. Open source is starting to take front stage on most AI capability, not products, but capability. And therefore, you see open source underpinning most of our advancements in intellectual growth at a rate that's never before seen, right? You've got Meta and Google and Chat GPT, and now you've got Elon Musk. You got these people in this competitive space that's advancing towards what I call the brain. We're trying to get to this. We're trying to get to this. And when we get to that and we have that working, even if we don't get the empathy piece, God forbid that should happen, then we've got ourselves to a position where all we need to have is unlimited power. And once we get unlimited power, then we're level 2 civilization. There's no need for nothing. I can now determine the means of production. I can get them produced. I can do so in an economic fashion that doesn't create all the smog and the junk that we have in our society today, right? I don't know how open source the digital sapient's going to become. Because once you build one of them, the economic factor is the downstream effects. It's the same thing that lets people build these massive language models and not charge for them. Those models were not cheap to build. You got the compute time to get it. So why would I just throw them out there as open source? It's the same reason Tesla open sourced the mechanics of their car and said, can 10 million people go do this? Why? That drives the cost of those components down. And in the AI world and the machine learning world, we're trying to accelerate the lowest cost possible denominator to get the maximum benefit. So what you're watching right now happen, mine's going to take 10 gig of RAM and mine's going to take 5 gig of RAM. We're trying to smash it down into the ever smaller, more cost-effective footprint. I call that the consumerization of it. And once we consumerize it, it goes to, I believe in the year 2050, software is going to be free. It's going to be impossible to charge for it because the ability to produce it is just talk to something and say, this is what I want, right? So if you say to ourselves, how competitive, how, red ocean versus blue ocean is this going to look? I think it's going to become very red oceaned at the mid-market level. And then there's going to be people who have learned how to build superior performance in their digital CEOs with whatever they're doing, and they figured out how to do it, and they're going to get to charge more for them. What I can't tell is, will this become so open source that your entire organization is free? The knowledge organization is,
Yeah, and speed might also have some component there, right? So people get faster to that superior digital CEO for some reason or other. It won't be sustainable, but there'll be a time differential.
And tell me what you mean by that.
Well, you painted this picture of this higher layer that some will be better at designing the digital CEO, which means asking better questions, if I follow your metaphor. Well, maybe
having more data.
Maybe some people will just get there faster than others for whatever reason.
You got a McKinsey that owns, 13 years worth of, intelligent data about good decision making and all the components with it. And you can start to put that into your digital CEO that you build, right? You're going to get there quicker because you've got access to massive quantities of value data, right? ADP has payroll data for 30 years of payroll data for every job description you can possibly imagine. They should be a digital HR department tomorrow.
For everybody.
This is a failure of ADP right now, right here, to not become that. Open source it, get it out in the world, charge for it 5 cents a transaction, and wipe everyone else out. Why? You've got 100 years worth of payroll data. You've got all the benefits data. You have it all. Stop hugging it. Set it free and become $1 trillion company tomorrow by you eliminate the rule set, because we're all trying to figure out what should I pay that position when I get into it. You have all the data and you should be able to keep all that data. Just stop trying to hug the, the factory the way you're doing it and set it free.
Yeah. Well, maybe you could speculate that for the great big marketing organizations, the digital marketing like WPP that spans the world.
Yes.
It's got 1,000 agencies or something like that. It's got, as you say, billions of transactions in its history. They could do the same thing.
They could.
Yeah.
They could 100%. And one of the things that Cooperative Computing has started to do with clients is figure out how do we help you digitize those in your world. We're not yet to the digital CEO, but if you've got the data, digital doctors are going to outperform non-digital doctors. And that process of us trusting it is going to be a little while, but the massive quantities of data that we have around this process of the intricacy that you do and how hard is it. Let's take LASIK or, finite brain surgery or things of that nature. The robotic systems are just going to outperform us. They're not going to make the same mistakes. They're going to have the analytics in front of them. So our ability to digitize the workforce and do so in an elegant enough fashion that we trust it, and feel free to do so, because we're trying to get to that, let's just say level 2.5 civilization. At level 3, as a civilization, we are no longer struggling with the same day-to-day things that we're struggling with. We should become crime-free. We should become a civilization that no longer has to worry about you have more than I do or less than I do. To get to that, we got to become free of the burden of that ego space that keeps us locked into what we do as humans.
Yeah. Well, Kramer, let's wrap up there. We're getting to the top of the hour. Thank you so much. You make me feel very pedestrian in the things I worry about in managing companies and getting the P&L right and doing the 5-year plan. And I'm happy to think from what you're telling me that's all going away. There'll be no such thing as managing a company. We'll have to figure out how to evolve it or let it evolve or let it go in some directions. Will it be constrained in any way? How will I keep it inside its own light cone, or will it just go where it wants to go?
There's two things. I read this book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a CEO once, right? And there's a way of management style. I can't remember the guy that put it together, but it's called the EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, right? And I plugged those two together for this one purpose. As we think about our ability to innovate on the consumer's mind, it's about that emotional, empathetic, tangible that's tangible to us and not tangible to the machinery. And we realize that as we start to interact with humans. I think that what happened during COVID taught us that we can almost collapse a civilization by not interacting with each other. And as we start to interact now, and that interaction creates these other modes of thinking, we appreciate it more. Some of us less. Some of us say, I love that because I'm that person. But we start to understand as we interconnect with humans what that looks like. So while your 5-year plan, and how do I go produce my 5-year plan? Is my P&L going to do what I want? Do I understand how to innovate and grow? The piece of innovate and grow gets more time from you. And it requires less to say, go build a 5-year plan spreadsheet, because you go to Copilot and say, hey, I need a 5-year plan. I need you to estimate cost of goods are going to be this. I need you to estimate this. Give me that forecast in an hour. I'll review it with you. Once I review it with you, I'll tell you what I need you to tweak. And it says, got it, right? The reality of that plan is still yours. Why? I know my buyer. I know the consumer. I understand the empathetic shift in what's going on. I understand that the next generation of civilization is going to be someone who will fly to Bali, work in Bali because the cost structure is lower. And therefore, I'm going to have to figure out, how do I consumerize into Bali? Because a bunch of people are going to move from here to there.
Mhm.
There's all these things that are now going to become critical to you as you do that.
Yeah. Fascinating. Well, we'll try and get our heads around it, Kramer, and develop that mindset. That's the other thing that we
Shift
yeah,
perspectives,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
exactly.
shift perspectives.
Good. Well, thank you so much for today, and thank you for painting the vision. And it's also reality, right? It's happening now. We're
It's
we're
happening
not
now.
fantasizing here.
Yep. Who thought that you would see manufacturers producing humanoid robots? We went from 2 companies. I think right now, the last count, there's 35 companies, and they're doing it well, by the way. It's not like junk. There's 35 companies now producing those, right? In the end, you're going to have a choice. And so my wife's excited. I showed her the other day about, look, doing the laundry, yada, yada, yada. My wife loves to cook, but she doesn't want to do the laundry. So I'm just going to rent a laundry service bot who comes in once a week to do the laundry, and I'm not going to mess with that. She'd do that tomorrow. The reality of that is coming, my friend.
Good. Well, I, for one, I'm looking forward to it.
Very good.
But thank you,
Hunter,
Kramer.
thank you so much.
We'll put your contact information in the in our material. So, Cooperative Computing.
Yes, sir. Cooperative Computing. You can send it to David. It's D. Kramer at Cooperative Computing. I'm the Chief Product Officer. And I will engage the right people. If someone just wants to chat about it, understand it a little bit more, what value can be created, we'd be excited to have a conversation with you.
Good. Well, thank you so much. And perhaps you and I can talk again in the future. I'd love that.
I would love to.
Good.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Have a good
This has been another episode of the Value Creators Podcast. Thanks for listening. You can visit thevaluecreators.com for links and resources related to this episode, and check out hunterhastings.com for more content on entrepreneurial business management based on value creation principles.